The following is a special multiple episode presentation of the End of a Species podcast. During these episodes, you may notice that the signature catchphrase of the show is not used. This is intentional and should not be construed as a peace treaty between End of a Species and the target of said catchphrase. End of a Species is committed to its hatred of GME. The catchphrase will return after the conclusion of this series. Enjoy the show. I'm not supposed to drink coffee.
Yeah. I tend to not drink coffee because I'm a hipster douchebag. Not really, but like
A little bit.
But
I think we both are in a way.
I've never really liked the taste of coffee, but I will drink coffee if it's basically a dessert with with whipped cream and chocolate chips and stuff with coffee flavoring. Like then I'll like partake in coffee.
They take an eyedropper and put 2 drops of coffee. See, the thing
like
is,
Starbucks. Like it's usually Starbucks because for some reason Dunkin' Donuts is basically sugar. Like it's like, hey, here's syrup with coffee flavoring or whatever. But like Starbucks has like I think it's called a double chocolate chip frappuccino, and it's basically a dessert.
sounds like a dessert.
It's a chocolate chip smoothie milkshake with whipped cream on it, and it's got some coffee in there. And then I'm like, yeah, I'll because my wife likes coffee, but she doesn't like to drink coffee, but she likes coffee. And if we're ever like going on an outing on the day, and it's like, hey, do you want to get a Starbucks? As kind of like a treat, and she's like, yeah, I'll get, and I like that's usually what I get is a double chocolate chip frappuccino.
I even though I'm not supposed to drink coffee, I experienced coffee recently. I've experienced coffee in 3 different levels. There's and we used to have a Keurig, but the Keurig kept getting like algae, kind of like green water, where we had to empty the whole tank, clean the whole tank out, get another filter. So we switched that out, and we got a I don't know what the brand is, but it's basically the regular coffee maker. You put the ground coffee in, pours the water through it, and you get a pot of coffee.
Yeah.
Good old pot of coffee. And
yeah.
So
the thing you get at 7-Eleven at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like
basically.
The basic coffee. And sometimes you get French roast. What movie was that? Where Jean Reno was Godzilla. And he was French, and they came in and they were like the special ops team.
Oh yeah,
and then they're like, "This is a French roast," and they're like, "What? It's not French roast." Like that one.
Wow, Wow.
I just brought back some memories.
That's a whole separate story. And if he hears this, I have a friend who almost didn't graduate high school because of that movie, because he cut to go watch that movie, and whenever I remember, I just remind him of that.
But Puffy did a song for that too.
Yeah. But when he was still Puffy then.
Yeah.
He wasn't Diddy. He was still Puffy.
Yeah.
And then
he got some eye cream.
Yeah.
He's better.
Well, like so the coffee that I've had, like I get the ground Dunkin', which you're right, it's very, very mild, and it just, if you don't drink coffee often and you start drinking coffee, it just helps your digestion. That's all it does. It doesn't really have like that punch.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's like Starbucks where my wife buys the beans and we grind them.
Okay.
And that shit is like you drink it and you feel like
electricity.
And what Dunkin' does for your digestion, Starbucks is like, we doing this.
Yeah. Clear out a half hour in your schedule.
Like we out.
In about 2 hours, you need to clear out a half hour in your schedule.
Yeah, we
because this is handled.
We out this. And so then my mother-in-law has some friends in Hawaii. And prayers to Hawaii, because earthquake and all the crazy stuff happening there.
Yeah.
But they make they make their own coffee. Like they grow their coffee, and sometimes they ship her beans, and that coffee is smooth. It's like somewhere in between where it's smooth and it's potent, like it wakes you up, but it doesn't also make you like let you know that the entirety of your insides are going to come out of you. So I guess what I'm saying is find somebody that's not like a company, like a major company, and find like local growers or people that are smaller and get the real shit.
Get a quality product for your cash,
so you don't have to shit.
Yeah.
Right. And speaking of having to shit,
yeah,
I think that's a good segue for where we are,
because there were no toilets in my house.
Yeah, there's no toilets, and
we're living in a hotel still.
I'm Jeff,
and I'm Adam,
and this is the End of a Species podcast, and this is part 3 of this horrendous. Like, I feel PTSD telling the story.
I do too,
almost as much as I did
re-victimized.
Like Adam has told me pieces of this like as it's happening, right? Contemporaneously hitting me with the details. And I couldn't imagine living in like, I'd be, I don't know. Somebody may be in the backyard of that woman who doesn't kill kittens. Like that's where I'm at. So anyway,
yeah.
So when we last left, this
is Wednesday, January 13th. They rode off into the sunset. I was working and couldn't affect anything, and we're like, what are they coming back? We don't know. So Thursday,
and you don't have a job that you can like leave. Like you have a job where you have to be there.
I'm like, I can leave for like,
if it's like
someone died.
Yeah, it's like act of God type shit. You can leave, but if it's just like, my wife, I think I left my toaster plugged in, or my the oven on, or whatever.
I left my phone at home or something.
Nah, that's not happening.
Yeah. My wife was in a car wreck. Like I can go for that, like that kind of shit. But like, it's like, no, you're important. You're in the middle of handling important stuff. Like this, you're here. So, in any case, I go to work and my wife goes back to the house, and they show up. They show up at 7:30. So they were there in the driveway when she got there at about 7:45 to let them in at 8. And they go to work, and they don't really talk to her. They don't really say hi. She brought them breakfast. They didn't say thank you.
There's a human piece of me that wants desperately to believe that they did not talk to your wife because they were embarrassed.
Oh, I'm sure it was not that.
I just need to believe that in my soul, because otherwise that kind of gives you a window into, and I don't want to sound elitist, but fuck it, that gives you a window into why you don't have money.
Yeah. Because
that's how you approach life.
Yeah. So in any case, they continue to do work, and they do some work for another day, and then the day ends and whatever. I come in on Friday because, like, okay, I'm like, Friday I've got off. I'm going to talk to them and be like, hey, look, I get what happened. I understand what happened. At a certain level, I can even respect what happened, but I am not happy with what happened. It's that whole Lando conversation in Solo where he's like, I don't like it, I don't agree with it, but I accept it.
Yeah.
Because, it happened.
I get your hustle.
Yeah. I get what happened, but like, whatever. And I have a conversation of like, look, that is not happening again. Not happening again. You're not walking off my job again, because if that happens, we're getting somebody else. Like, whatever. And then what proceeded to happen over the next couple of hours was I was talked to in a friendly manner, and I said hello, and they said hello back, and they're going about their business. And I was asked, and this is a part that I left off because, like, in general, it doesn't matter, but, like, I'm starting to know way too much about everyone that comes to install stuff at my house's personal bullshit. I learned that this guy was not a full... He's a licensed contractor, but he does framing. He doesn't do tile. So he's not a tile guy, but he's agreeing to do tile because whatever. He needs the money. I learned that he was not the nicest of people like 20, 30 years ago or whatever. And that he had during that time become saved and become a Christian. And like, I heard his like coming to Jesus story. And I'm like, that's okay. Like, I'm a Christian.
Not the nicest of people, how?
Like, so to get into elaboration, like he used to get into fistfights. He used to get arrested. He got arrested for weed a lot of times.
Okay.
He even tried to talk to me about getting CBD oil. And like, if that's a thing that works for you, great. Like, I don't have any interest in it. Like, I'm not interested, but like he was hawking it to both me and my wife. And I'm like, stop trying to sell us, because it's not even his. He's getting it from, I guess, Cheech Marin's personal website and ordering it from there and getting it delivered because it helps him with his cancer that he thinks he has, but he hasn't been diagnosed, and with his anxiety. And I'm like, okay, whatever works for you, man. But like, you haven't talked to a doctor, so this is your self-diagnosis, but whatever. Okay, sure. Sounds good.
You know, testing for cancer is a lot cheaper than treatment for cancer.
It is. Saying. It is, but he doesn't, surprisingly, he doesn't know where his health insurance is currently at. Surprise, surprise. And I've also heard a lot about his pastor, and this is where things come up, is like during the course of this day, he's talking to me about his pastor, which he has before, and he's told me like, hey, you should go listen to his podcast. It's really this, it's really that. And I'm like, okay. But I haven't. Like, I've got my own church. I go to my own church people, and like, they've got their own podcast, and like, whatever. And then this day, around lunchtime or whatever, and this is a day I didn't feed them. I brought them their breakfast that my wife gathered for them, and it's like, hey, take this in a paper bag to them. And I'm like, all right. They walked off their job. They walked off the job. I'm not particularly fond of handing them anything at this point because they basically tried to fuck us. But okay. So I handed them the bag and whatever. And at lunchtime, I'm like, I'm not feeding them. I'm microwaving some SpaghettiOs or something. And I'm like, that's going to be my lunch. And the proceeds to tell me about, like, have you been listening to the podcast? They had a really good one, like, on Wednesday. And I'm like, oh, the day they walked off my job? No, I hadn't. I had other things I was worrying about as opposed to, like, finding your church's podcast on
Listen,
the internet.
Motherfucker, we're not bonding. I'm here, like, blowing out my levels, but, like, we're not bonding. This isn't bonding hour. This is, like, you do tile hour. Anyway.
So in any case, he then proceeds. I told him no, I hadn't. And he proceeds to tell me, he's like, oh, I thought you were a better Christian than that. And I'm like, it's not like I was lying to him. It's not like I lied about anything. It's not like I was like, yes, on Wednesday I definitely will watch. I was like, look, I haven't gotten around to listening to your preacher. And he's like, I thought you were a better Christian than that. And at that point, I'm like, I
what?
You didn't hear that? Oh, did I not tell you this one?
All right, listeners, this is new to me. Oh my, all right. I don't know what this dude looks like, but I'm picturing his face caved in. What?
Yeah. So, and this is because this is more of like an on a person to person thing. This doesn't have a whole lot to do with the actual job. It had to do with like who he is as a person. But like, I'll say, like, having been someone who grew up in church and who's been going to church since I was 5 or 6, like, I know church people can be bitchy, nasty church people. Like, it's a thing that can happen. But I was like, you're in my house calling me, saying, I think you were a better Christian than that. And I
fed you.
Yeah.
When I didn't, and it's not even like you fed them and were like, did you like that lunch I made for you?
Yeah.
You just like, here's food, and you walk away, not even waiting for like, didn't say thank you.
They came out, like, I had a table out in the backyard, and I had a grill, and I had a platter, and like, hey, here's lettuce, tomato, burgers, dogs, cheese, whatever. I'm on the grill, flipping. I'm like, do you want cheese on your burger? You want it melted, or you want to put it straight on? Like, here's your stuff. Have a seat. Sit at my table. Eat my food. Then go back inside and work. Like that kind of shit. And like, I thought I'm like, and I'm not trying to be braggadocious in any kind of way, but like, I'm not asking for anything extra from you. Then do your job, like the job you're being paid to do. Like the fact that I didn't listen to your podcast is way out. Your pastor's podcast is way out of the realms of like what our relationship needs to be.
I'm gonna say something. His pastor's podcast produces people that walk off jobs and don't have gas in their car. Our podcast, like I've never walked in. Maybe his pastor should listen to this fucking podcast. Get some real hair on your Christianity, man. Just saying. I cannot believe that shit. Like I thought you were a better Christian. I thought you were a better live person. You about to be dead. So in my house, you talking about that shit? Oh.
So any case, Friday happens, Saturday happens, Sunday, like I'm back at work, and my wife is like, "Hey, they haven't shown up," and I'm like, "Are they taking another day off? Like they had 2 days off last week, technically. Like are they taking another day off? Like they're still not done. Like at this point, they've worked their way through the kitchen and or the living room and dining room." Skipped over a section of tile, like an area, and started in the corner of our master bedroom and has started working their way backwards. And I'm like, you don't do that because you're going to fuck up the pattern. Like, there's a pattern we picked out, and like you're trying to adhere to it, you're going to fuck it up by jumping space. And they're like, oh no, we measured that out really well. Oh, guess what? They didn't. And it'll match up, and guess what? It didn't. So they. I was
just about to say, well, they're taking their time, so clearly it was a great job that they did, right?
No. So in any case, and here's the other stupid thing. They get to the door where the living room matches up to the door for the bedroom, and they stop, and then they move on to something else. So there's a gap, like in every place that they've got a door, there's a gap right now, and I'm like, when are they gonna fucking finish this? So they take Sunday off. They come back Monday, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we just needed a day off to kind of like, we need to do laundry, and like I didn't have any clean clothes, and I didn't have this and then that, and like we had to do." I'm like, "All right." So I know, but you left my wife hanging at the house by herself, and like didn't show up. Like, I guess Sunday is the day off day. Got you. All right.
Mind you. You're still in a hotel.
We're still in a hotel, yeah. So she packed the dogs back up, at the kind of around like 4 or 5 o'clock. Went back to the hotel, and I kind of hung out there and whatever until I got home. Monday, we're starting to get like stuff going because it's like, okay, we need. They've agreed to reinstall the shower. So they hire some people that Monday they're going to show up and they're going to take the shower out. I'm like, all right, cool. So they hire some people. Like I'm at work. My wife calls like, hey, they came over. Like these 2 guys came over to take out the shower and they're going to install the new shower and put up drywall and whatever. I'm like, great, awesome. They come out and
strap in your seatbelts.
They come out, take the shower out, and they're like, oh yeah, they got that shower out in like an hour. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Sounds great. Like, let me know when they're done. Like, she's like, there's another day. She made them lunch, made these new people lunch, whatever. She's in there trying to patch paint, like something that this guy has been told to do. And is like, how? And one of the guys that's installing the tub, like, comes out to her and is like, hey, who installed this? And they're like, oh, we did. And they're like, how did you do it? I'm like, she tells me this, and I'm like, what do you mean? How did we do it? We lifted it up and put it in the hole and cemented it down and then put the stuff in, made sure the pipes were connected. Like I held it up while she reached under and tightened things. Like I'm like, what do you mean? There's 2 guys. Like we did it. Unprofessional. Like what do you do? And she's like, okay. So she tried to explain how she did it to them, and then they're like, okay, well we'll get it done. And they're like, okay. So like they're in the process of
doing
stuff.
Wait a minute. Hold on. You mean how did you? See, I lost the step. I'm thinking they're asking like, how did you do it? So, because usually, you get the thing where the handyman or whatever comes to your house, sees a thing and goes, oh, these people, when they put the house in, they didn't put the switch in right or whatever.
Yeah.
And they always badmouth the guy before. Mm-hmm. And you're saying they did, how did you do it? Like they were wondering how to do it?
They were wondering, They didn't know how the tub got seated where we got the tub seated. Like, they're like, does it fit? And they're like, yeah, motherfucker, it fits. We've got, like, you took out the old one. There's a brand new one in a box in the garage.
It's the same one.
It's the same one.
Okay.
Like, it's the same one with the same shower. Like, it's the same shit.
Oh my
Like,
God.
what do you mean? How did you do it? So, I'm like,
What's the secret?
I'm like, oh, this isn't gonna go well. Like, and I'm at work still, and I'm like, this isn't gonna go well. Fuck.
Don't undo those seatbelts.
So they get the thing installed and mounted, and they're like, all right, well, we just gotta connect some of the pipes and hardware or whatever. And then she's still doing her patching from like painting and stuff. And she's like, oh, awesome. And the guy tells her, is like, this is why I don't do tubs. This is why I'm an electrician. I'm like,
What?
okay, he's a what? He's an electrician. They hired an electrician to do a shower. And I'm like, okay. So she goes in, and like after they're done and they've put the pipes and stuff in, they've put the drywall back. But like she's like, hey, can you make sure that you cover these parts and like make sure these parts are filled in? Like looking at the drywall because they cut it and whatever. Like make sure this is in there correctly and make sure this is in there correctly and kind of smooth out these edges because it's looking a little rough right now with the drywall tape and whatever. And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'm like, this is after they fed them. And then she gets, like, while she's talking to him, she gets a phone call from the area manager guy, the contracting area manager. And he's like, hey, how are they doing? And she's like, oh, they're doing pretty well. Like, they're getting this done. They got this part. And she goes outside to finish the conversation with them. She finishes the conversation, goes back inside. They're gone. Not done. Gone. Missing. The tub is installed. The piping and whatever is like, it's got the faucet and stuff on it. And the drywall is left where it was left, and they're just gone. The car's gone. She asked the two guys doing the tile, and she's like, where'd they leave? And they're like, well, they said something about not getting paid enough and then left.
Jeff shakes his head disapprovingly.
And I'm like, okay, and I talked to, like, my wife is telling me this, and I'm like, did they test the tub? Like, what do you mean, did they test the tub? I'm like, did they test the tub for, like, it working, leaks, like drainage? Did they test it to make sure stuff worked? Because when I installed it, like as I went, I made sure stuff didn't leak while stuff was still open. We now have drywall up, and we don't know if anything's working or not. Like, is stuff sealed? Is it not sealed? Does the water run? Where are we at? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, fuck. So the next day is my day off. I go in, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to Tony Stark this shit and fucking see what's going on. So, like, I test stuff, and, like, the faucet's not adhered to the wall of the shower faucet, and so it shakes, and it ripples through the thing, and I'm like, God damn it. I'm like, oh, my God. Like, I mean, like, I can probably fix this. So I'm connecting stuff and connecting this and connecting that. Meanwhile, this day, a guy showed up early in the morning from another company that actually does plumbing, and they're like, yeah, they hired me to install your toilets, because at this point the toilets were covered and retiled in those areas. And I'm like, yeah, here. And I pointed to two places. These are where this is where the stuff goes. So they install tile, he installs the toilets while I'm Tony Starking this shit. And I'm like, okay, awesome. So, like, looking at stuff, and I'm like, okay, I fixed what I think they've got. Now let me do like a drainage test. So I plug the drain, turn the water on full blast in order to fill up the tub, and then I'm going to drain it. And I'm like, it's taking a really long time to fill. Maybe I'm not paying attention right, or something's wrong or whatever. So I go to check on the backyard to check on the dogs. I'm like, okay. I come back, and I'm going back into the bathroom, and when I turn to go into the bathroom, I can look into one of the other rooms, and there, lo and behold, is a pool of water in one of my spare bedrooms. And I'm like, it's leaking.
Oh my God.
So,
you mean the electrician wasn't able to put in a tub?
Didn't install the tubs correctly. So
did it leak when you put it in?
No.
How much did you get paid to put it in?
Free, actually.
Oh, well then,
yeah, surprisingly.
And you had never done it before?
I'd never done a shower before.
I don't want to minimize the process of putting in a tub.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to like trivialize the work of being a plumber. But it seems that if you're handy, like even if you're an electrician, it seems like if you're handy, it's
If you can read instructions.
Yeah, like it's enough if you care about your job. It may take you, like an experienced plumber, got you done super fast. But if you somebody just who just knows your way around tools and knows you, it's like it seems like something that can be transferred from one to another thing. And it just may take you a little longer, but you just have to give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to give a shit. You're not in there for like the quick paycheck and then bouncing. And they're like, oh, she wants us to do extra work and like make things look nice. Fuck this, we're out. And like, whatever.
I just figured I'd throw it, and if it bounces and lands where it's supposed to, then I'm done.
Yeah. So I then call the guy who the middle management guy. That's just what I'm going to call him from now. Middle management. I call middle management and I'm like, hey, what the fuck, man? My house is now flooded. Like, my wife was out getting, was on her way back with food, and I'm like, we have no towels. Everything's packed in the garage. Stop somewhere. She stopped at this like discount store and bought all of their towels and came back, and we toweled down the place and dried up everything as we possibly could. But I was like, someone needs to come out here and fix this or whatever. And like, okay. So he's like, I don't have anybody. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have, like fucking talk to some, like, do what we do and fucking find somebody in the goddamn phone book if you have to. Like, someone needs to come out here and fix this shower. So in any case, me and my wife find somebody to come out there and take a look at the shower. Apparently, the guys don't know what plumber's putty is and didn't plumber's putty the drain. So he plumber's putties the drain, and he's like, okay, I think it's good, but like, I don't know, because I don't know what's underneath this. So like, I can't guarantee the work, because I can't guarantee the work that was done before, because I don't know who these people were. And you don't, and I asked middle management a bunch of times, like, who were these people? And they're like, oh, I got their names from like this guy, which is the store manager of Blue Box. And I'm like, and what is their background? And I'm like, construction. I'm like, fucking, there's a lot of area for construction, man.
It's like they're taking either, I'm going to use like the caveman way, like either you're taking a dart and throwing it at a wall, and wherever it lands, like blind, close your eyes, throw it at a wall and be like, that guy. Yeah. Or you're just randomly like scrolling through your contact list and just stopping it at a point and going, hey, can you put in a tub? I'd like to pay you.
That's exactly what's happening. Is basically like there's a Rolodex somewhere of like, these are people who do things, quote things.
Oh, it's the big wheel from Price is Right. They're just like,
yeah, and they call them and they're like, hey, can you do this for this price? And I know what's happening is they're trying to save money, because one of the other things that happened during this time is like, hey, we're getting to the point where we're going to have to start putting the baseboard back up. What are we doing with this baseboard? Because it's got nails and shit hanging out of it. Some of it's cracked and broken. Like, we don't know what goes to what room because it's all pre-cut. What are we doing with this? And they're like, well, we're going to have to get you new stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to have to get us new stuff. So how about we get that there? And so they order some stuff and have it delivered to our house. And it is the most, like, we had nice floor molding or whatever. They gave us the most boring ass. It was basically a plank of wood with like a bevel at the top. That was the baseboard that they sent us. I'm like, look at this and look at what you gave us. This has like a nice curve and design. There's some intricate lays in there. This is a plank with a bevel on it. Like, someone cut this at a 35-degree angle to go up, and that's all it is. Can we get something closer to what we originally had? Like what we were... And they're like, I'm like, yeah, fucking sigh all you want. Fucking do it.
The thing you broke. The thing you broke back.
Yeah. Not to mention the fact that, like, hey, you've got to deliver new vanities, you've got to deliver new countertops, like, you got to fix our cabinets. Like, and there's a lot of stuff.
Baseboards aren't like, it's not like saying, look, I had a TV and I had it for 10 years, but now I want but it was a Sony, so now I want the newest Sony, so you got to spend like $8,000.
Yeah.
No, it's baseboards. Baseboards is cheap. It's like the wood that's left over when you've done all the cool stuff you want to do with wood, right? So the fact that it has an intricate design, it's still mass produced. It's still like you're just putting it through a thing that's pre-done, and they just go bzzz. It's not like there's a team of people like carving into the wood. Look up baseboard prices. It's not that expensive. It really isn't. So you broke it.
Yeah, exactly.
You broke it.
So so where was I? Baseboards. So they, and not to mention the fact that they're delivering our vanities and stuff again. The vanity that was the one my wife went to Georgia for shows up and it's broken. They send us a broken thing. So we're like, hey, we need another one. So they're like, okay, well, we got to go find one. Like they had to go to like upper northern Florida to find one because they, like, again, this was like a sold out end of the line kind of a thing. So they found another one, brought it back or whatever. Got that. Got a another other master bath vanity or vanity. Got us a new mirror because they tore the mirror out, and then and it's got a bunch of like drywall and cracks and whatever in it. And I'm like, just all kinds of stuff that just needs to be replaced. We get a plumber out there that fixes that whole thing. We start to clean up the drywall because like what the electricians had done is they basically thrown a bunch of plaster on the wall, and they're like, it's good enough. And so we're starting to clean the drywall that's on the shower off, and I come to a point where it's fractured at the top. So not only did they install it wrong, but they also broke it. So like this is now like going to be the third vanity that shower surround that we've had to put in. So like I'm taking pictures, I'm sending it to Loaves, I'm sending it to all these people. I'm like, hey, this needs to get replaced again. Like, let's see what we can do. And they're like hemming and hawing. I'm like, look, man, it's got to get done. And so we tear the whole thing out again. And meanwhile, father and son duo are still installing stuff, and they're putting in the grouting. The son is putting in the grouting while the father is finishing up kitchen and laundry room, and he's doing that by himself. And I'm like, all right, and that comes into play. That comes into play later. But like, we're currently at what, the 19th of January, and I'm like 23rd. Like 23rd is gonna be the thing. Like I was right. And so,
which is remarkably close to my birthday.
And so it takes the 18th, 19th, and 20th, 3 days for old man installer, 62-year-old guy, to do probably, I want to say, a length of flooring that's probably 5 feet wide and then probably about like 9 feet long. It takes him 3 days to do it while his son is grouting the rest of the house.
Length times width. That's 45 square feet for those keeping score at home.
Yeah.
I'd like to pause right now. Like I've only done this like a couple of times, and I think it was just in the first episode, but I want you to hit pause when I'm done saying this, but I want to know, what would you do at this point? If you've heard all 3 episodes so far, what would you do at this point in the story? Would you be like, it's cool, we'll see how it turns out? That's one end of the spectrum. Or would you be swinging a baseball bat at people's faces with a nail in it, like hoping to make contact and just like, fuck it, I'm going to go to jail? Or that's the other extreme, or something in the middle. Like, what would your reaction be at this point?
Yeah.
And now you've unpaused, and we'll continue with the story.
So we're now rounding out to Thursday. By this time, we've had to go and find a painter to fix our painting issues for all the scuffs and scrapes and whatever else has happened. We are trying to find a new plumber, because the plumber that came out and fixed the drain, I was like, hey, we need to redo this. Can you come out? And he's like, no, that's too much work. And I'm like, what do you mean too much work? You're going to be paid. Like, why do you, like, just, you said you can do it. You have your card. It says shower remodeling on your card. He's like, yeah, it's too much work. I know I can do a toilet in a half an hour and get paid X amount of money. That'll take me the better part of a day or two, and it's not worth my time. And I'm like, oh, here's money. I don't want it.
As a general rule,
I'm like, so we're hunting down a new
if
plumber.
you come out to my house to do the shower, then I'll be more likely to call you when I need to do the toilet.
Yeah.
But if you don't come to my house to do the shower, then you're never going to hear from me again, no matter how many toilets you want to do.
And all my friends are going to know, yeah, don't do that guy because he doesn't want to do any work. He'll do easy shit, but he's not going to do anything complicated, and he'll probably half-ass it.
And I'm going to tell you, at this point, if you tell me that you've met anybody that has been unnamed in this story, you're never interact. Like, I won't buy peanuts from you. Like, we're not... You're like the reverse 666. Like, you're not doing any commerce with me whatsoever because I'd be afraid that whatever it is going to melt my face. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so this is Thursday. We are starting the process. Oh, and also we've hired a painter, and he's started painting some of the rooms, but he won't, like, because of where things are. He's like, I'm gonna space out when I'm painting things because they're not done in certain rooms, and I don't want to be working on top of other people. And we're like, okay. So he came out and started painting. I want to say Wednesday, Thursday, and then
they haven't grouted yet, right?
No, they're in the process of grouting at this point.
Okay, cool.
They're in the process of grouting. At Thursday they had finished grouting, and Friday they were putting up baseboards and stuff. So Thursday night, like, we're painting, and like at Thursday night the grouting is done. And then, like, it's dry, and they're like, everything's great. And I'm like, okay. And my wife comes home from work at like 8:30 at night, and like, I'm trying to like fix stuff around the house from like faucets, and I'm like the stuff that this other guy got paid to patch drywall with or whatever. I'm doing now. Like, I'm patching the drywall because it's like, look, we need to be back in our house. We're running out of hotel time. Like, my credit card can't take much more, Captain. Like. So, like, I'm like, this needs to get done. This needs to get done by Friday. Like, we need to be out of the hotel by Friday. So, like, tomorrow, like, we need to be like move-inable or whatever. So we're putting up and patching and painting stuff that we need to patch, paint, and whatever. And Thursday night, my wife is like, have you checked for any hollow tiles? And I'm like, I haven't checked for hollow tiles. Like, I've been busy doing stuff. And she's like, well, I'm gonna check. So
the thing on a string.
Yeah. So she starts the process. Most of the house, pretty solid. Throughout, I want to say all the other rooms, there's like 12. And they're minor. They could have been like the recommended like golf ball size ones. But in any case, we had such a bad reaction with the first one. We were like, mark it. And she's walking around and she's like feeling stuff. And I'm like, there's still sharp corners on this. Like, this hasn't been grouted right. This hasn't been fixed right. This hasn't been fixed right. And I'm like, motherfucker.
After I fed you burgers.
After we fed you multiple times and whatever, and we've been patient and whatever else. So she's going around and she's knocking on, she's doing the tests. We come to the kitchen, the place where Daddy installer did all of his work and took 3 days. And it exploded. Like, the whole thing is ramshackled, fixed with hollow tiles all over the place. And this is where our washer, our dryer, big heavy objects are going to sit there and shake and whatever. Like, this is where all of this stuff is sitting.
And foot traffic.
And heavy foot traffic in and out of the garage, like going through. Like, this is
groceries.
This is bad.
Yeah.
So we mark all of those. We have a total of 39 hollow tiles,
which is better than 83.
It's less than half. Yeah. But still quite a bit. So Friday comes. They come in, they start getting to work on their quote finishing of things, and they're doing the baseboard. And I'm like, hey guys, you gotta stop. This is what we gotta go over. And it's like, why is there blue painter's tape all over everything? And I'm like, oh,
wonderful question.
Wonderful question. Allow me to retort. And so I go through the process of explaining what happened, and he's like, oh, there's nothing wrong with these tiles. And I'm like, I beg to differ. And he's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. I'm like, excuse me? He's like, look, this is a process. This is a problem. Like, you knew this going in. When you set up shop with us, you knew we had a problem with hollow tiles. And then they're starting to want to quote the thing to me. And I was like, look, I read the thing. I read the thing top to bottom, like for the national standard of what, constitutes hollow tiles or whatever. Like, some of this is probably dismissible, but like there's a lot of that's bad. So especially in this area, area needs to get fixed bad. And I'm like, look, there's some of these that are like on like wall lines and this, that, and that. Like, these, we can probably overlook these, but like we've got to go back. These definitely have to be fixed. And he has like this argument with me of like, he's stamping on it. And he's like, I'll tell you this, if you can hit it with a hammer and it not break, we don't have to do it. And I'm like, this isn't a bargaining thing, dude. Like, this isn't like something we bargained for. Like, you got hired to do a job. We're not satisfied with it. You need to fix it. And he's like, but I bet you can't hit it with a hammer. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. He's like, are you just telling you're going to make me redo that? And I'm like, yes. Like, I'm going to make you redo this because this is our life and this is our floor. And this is going to get redone and be done right. Like, especially in this area where it's like, when you tap on stuff, it should be like, and then like when you get to the kitchen and all this other kind of stuff, it's like tong, 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 tong. It's like ringing a bell. And I'm like, this is fucking crazy. Like, we can't live like this. Like, it's all the way down every single plank. And he's like, look, it needs to be done this weekend. We need to get it done. Like, we're out, like we checked out of our hotel, this needs to get fixed. So we're going to get this. It's only this many tiles. Like, I think we cut the number down to like 27. From 39. We were like, 27 tiles have to get replaced. And like at this point, I'm like, we're done being back and forth and asking for days off and having to call out and all this other shit. Like, this needs to get fixed and needs to get done this weekend. This weekend it's getting handled and I will help. So at this point, our dogs had a vet visit early in the morning. We dropped them off at the vet and they're like, hey, how long can you hang on to them? And they're like, well, we need you to pick them up by 4:30. I'm like, all right, 4:30. So I come back and the guy's like, I can't chip up these tiles. I don't have the right tools. And I'm like, you don't have the right tools for anything. But I'm like, all right, what else do you need? And he's like, I need a chipping hammer. So I tell middle management, and I'm like, hey, this is what's happening. This is what needs to get done. Like, I got to go rent this guy a chipping hammer. He's like, don't worry, we'll pay you back. I'm like, all right, cool. So I go and rent a chipping hammer from a tool rental place, bring it back. He uses it. I'm like, how long do you need this? I'm like, at least the rest of the day, probably tomorrow. He uses it for like an hour and a half. It cost me like $140 to rent this thing. And I'm like, motherfucker, like, he's like, it's too big. He's like, I need a smaller blade. And I'm like, a smaller blade? Like, so he had the punching one and then he had his, the one for the thin set that's underneath. And I'm like, all right, I'll go see if I can find you a thinner one. Cause he's like, this is a 6-inch one and I need like a 4 or 5-inch. And I'm like, I'll go see what you can do. So I go around and nobody has one. Because that's not the size that it's supposed to be. 6 inches is the minimum. They go up to like a 15, but 6 inches is the smallest. I'm like,
there's a scene in Swordfish, the movie Swordfish, and I'm not a big Halle Berry fan, but there's a scene where our friend Hugh
Jackman, yeah,
is a hacker, and they sit him down, and John Travolta has a gun pointed at him and gives him a timer. It's like, yo, the best hackers in the world can do this. I'm just gonna. I don't remember. Let's say they can do it in 10 minutes. You have 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And he starts typing. That's kind of like the energy that we need for this. Like, hey, I saw the world championship of tiling last week. The best tilers in the world did this whole kitchen in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Shotgun. You have 30 seconds, my guy. You're not gonna have to worry about no cancer, no heart attack, no nothing.
Yeah.
Start chipping. I don't have to write. You're burning daylight, my man. 10 seconds have gone by.
So I drive around looking for a chipping hammer. I'm like, what else? Like, and before I left, I was like, what else do you need? And I was like, well, we're gonna need a hand cleaning up. I'm like, all right. I go out and buy a shop vac. I don't own a shop vac. I do now, but I went out and bought a shop vac. So like, I come back and I'm like, they don't have this. I've got a shop vac. I'm starting to vacuum up behind them all the stuff that they're chipping up, and they're like completely unhappy with it and whatever. And I'm like, all right, whatever you got to do. And, I have to pause because at the beginning of this, when they refused to do it originally, and then I said, you're going to do it anyway, they started to do the chipping up. And he's like, I want you to come in here and see something. And me and my wife is getting ready to go to work. And he brings us into the bedroom with one of the tiles that we had marked. And he takes a hammer and he's like, watch this. And he brings a hammer over his head and starts smacking it into the thing. He's like, it's not fucking breaking. It's not gonna break. There's nothing fucking wrong with this. And like screaming. And I'm like, what the fuck? And he's like, there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm like, okay, well, you've got to fix it now because you smashed the shit out of it. It's broken. But like, you scared me. You scared my wife. Whatever, you're here, your face is all red, and you're 3 inches from my face, and you're yelling at me. And I'm like, you're gonna do what I asked you to do, or if we need to get middle management involved or have anything else handled, like I felt like this guy was gonna hit me too, and
he had a hammer in his hand.
He had a hammer in his hand, and he's screaming and swearing at Kyle. And then his son steps in and he's like, Dad, we'll just calm down. Like, we'll just call the company. We'll just calm down. We'll handle it. And he's like, I know he's trying to make sure his dad doesn't have a heart attack. But, like, he's continuing to get in my face. And, like, my wife told me later that she's worried she was going to hit him. And, like, this is the thing. It was like, if he hit me in my own house, he would be dead. Like, he wasn't a big dude. He was, like, 5'4". Like, I'm 6'3". Like, he was smaller than my wife is. Like, my wife is 5'5" or 5'6", and like he's not made of much. Like, 62-year-old guy, but like he hits me in my own house, and he's got a weapon. Like, he's ended. Like,
you said a lot of stuff, but we don't want, like, you never want to get to that. That point is unnecessary. You don't want it to get to that. Whether the dude was 7'1" or 4'4" or whatever. Like, that's still a person, and he's just being an asshole in that moment.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get it to the level where you're like, hey, like I just killed a guy,
Like, well, like, exactly. Like, if he hit me or had a hammer or hit me with a hammer or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, if I threw a punch, like, I'd be worried I'd break him in half. Like, he's talking about how he has cancer and all kind of shit, and I'm like, Jesus, man. So. In any case, like, this was like early in the morning before my wife had to be at work at like 9, and so this is like 10 after 8 or something like that. And so I'm screaming back and forth at him, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be yelled at in my own goddamn house. Like, it's not gonna happen. Like, you can walk. Like, at this point, like, you can walk off the job, or you can finish and do what I told you, asked you to do. Like, you knew this hollow tile. You talked and like you were saying in one of the previous episodes. He badmouthed the hell out of the last guy that did this. It was like, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's doing this, and I know everything, and I'm so much better. And I'm like, obviously you're not, because you still got all these problems. And surprisingly, they're all the things that you did by yourself. Like, most of the other stuff is like minimal. Like, throughout the rest of the house, there's like 12. Over here, there's like over 20. Like, these are the ones that like need to get handled. But in any case, whatever. He agreed to start doing some of the work and whatever, and like, they're starting to chip stuff up. So anyway, dogs are at the vet. I'm picking up a chipping hammer. I'm picking up
another one.
Well, I picked up the first one. I'm looking for a blade for this chipping hammer that we've rented that I might have to buy because the rental place doesn't have anything smaller. I bought a shop vac. I came back. I ordered pizza and wings because like around 11:30, everything was getting to the point of like, oh, we're getting hungry. And I'm like, pizza's already on the way. You're not leaving. Like,
what a bad Christian you are.
Yeah, exactly. Like, pizza, wings, and soda are on the way. Like, have at whatever you want to have.
Brought them all the loaves and fishes.
Yeah. So they come, they eat, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'm vacuuming up behind you. I'm doing what do you need help with? I'm asking them, what do you need help with? This needs to get done this weekend. I can't talk to my...
You guys are hearing the ramblings of a desperate man that just wants his house back.
I don't want to have to go to my boss and be like, look, I need more time off, because like, we are out of time. My wife took 10 days off of work to be there. I took 4 this time three this time, and 3 the first time it was done. Like, it needs to get done. Like, this is getting ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like, we're going on almost 20 days of an install for this round. Plus, and it's not going to be done at 20 days. Like, but we need to be able to live in our house at 20 days.
Mind you, this is what date now? Like,
this is the 23rd.
The 23rd.
I'm sorry, the 22nd. 22nd.
So now we're bordering on 2 months. An undefined amount of time ago, there was an empty lot right next door to your house.
Uh-huh.
And I remember coming over to your house one day and like,
there's a house.
What the fuck is this?
There's a house there now.
There's like half a house up.
Yeah.
And then like we were hanging out like a couple days later, and there's a house and there's people living in the house. So what you're saying is they put up an entire domicile from scratch, like like
in the course of about 4 months, they went from wooded lot to house with people living in it.
And all you wanted was a floor.
I only wanted was a floor, but they turned it into a complete home remodel because of all the shit they broke in the process.
That's insane.
So, and I'm flabbergasted at this point. But anyway, like continuing on with the day, I'm like, what do you need to get done? And he's like, well, if you want to pick up a hammer, and I'm like, all right, let's fucking do it. So I pick up a hammer and I'm chiseling thin set out from underneath these tiles, and I go into the place where I know it needs to get done, which is the laundry room and the kitchen, and I'm working in there. And so like after lunch, so this is probably about 1:30 or so, I'm in there on the floor on my hands and knees in my own house that I have paid money for somebody else to come in and install tile, chipping up tile that needs to get replaced.
Mind you, you're still paying like a mortgage.
Yeah, I'm still like I haven't missed my mortgage payments. I haven't fucking missed meal. I haven't missed the light bill. I haven't missed the water. I had nothing. So I even paid the internet, which I didn't have access to for 2 months. So in any case, I'm chipping up tile. 4 o'clock comes around, so I spent 2 and some change hours chipping up tile. And 4 o'clock comes around, is like, hey, I have to go get my dogs. And they're working and blah, 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 blah. They're working. And I'm like, hey, I got to go get the dogs. They got to be out by 4:30. I'll be back shortly after that, so close to 5 o'clock or whatever. I'm like, okay. But I'll be back, and then we're gonna get all of this tile up tonight, and then like tomorrow we'll lay the new stuff, and I'll help you do whatever it is that you need to do for whatever it is or whatever. So I'm gonna help. The vet goes well. You know, I go pick them up. They're all happy and whatever, and they're like, "Oh, thank God you're here! Like we've never been here this long." And I'm like, I'm sorry. So I bring them home, and I put them in one of the rooms that didn't have any issues, and lock the door, and I go and I grab a hammer and chisel, and I'm like, hey, where are you guys working at? And they're like, well, we put in a 60-hour work week. Dad's already in the van, and we're going to go home. We'll see you on Monday. This is Friday. I'm like, no. We have a painter coming tomorrow to finish this shit, so this needs to be in the process of being done tomorrow, and I don't have any more vacation. Like, nobody's off. Like, no one will be here Monday. Everyone will be at work. And he's like, well, when's the next day you have off work? And I'm like, Wednesday. And he's like, well, we'll see you Wednesday. And they walk out. And so I'm like, if you walk out like this, I'm going to be doing your work, and I'll make sure it's taken out of your paycheck. Like, I will not, this is not going to end well. Like, you're walking off of a job like I told you not to. Again. Like, what, like, and they're like, he just kind of shrugs and left. And I'm like, okay. So I was like, well, leave my tools and supplies and whatever else. They left with everything. They left with the thin set. They left with the mortar. They took all of it. And I'll you know what? And I'll throw in a caveat for this. These guys, and I don't want this to come off as negative as it sounds, but are scavengers. Because the 2 vanities that were junk, like that were destroyed, and were like, these are brand new and unusable, I put them at the road. At the end of the workday, they load them up in their van and went back to the park with them. So they took them for their own use. And they're like, oh, he's, setting up a house, like this will be great in one of his rooms. And I'm like, it's broken in the back. And whatever. I'm like, we'll make it work. I'm like, okay. I don't want you to get in trouble for like taking stuff that's meant to, like, because this is a job site. Like, you're basically taking stuff from the job site. I don't want you to get in trouble for. And they're like, it's okay. It'll be okay. It's at the road.
I've never cut brake lines before. I'm not a car guy, so I wouldn't even know where the brake lines are. But if I ever was to cut brake lines, that situation seems like the part. Where so they got for free 2 relatively, like, basically brand new but damaged vanities and mirrors and stuff
for free. And like the master vanity is, again, well, I think it was like with the marble countertop and backsplash and all the stuff that went in, it was like $1,200, like minus the faucet, because I took the faucets off of them because the faucets were still good, but like it just whatever. But like this is like that's a lot of money, and like it's not like it's unusable, but like as far as for what we paid brand new to have it brand new, and then for someone to damage it, like no, you need to replace this because it's broken now. But they took it and
what ended up happening with the work materials?
So I spent until about 11 o'clock that night shipping up tile. My wife had work stuff that she was doing, and she didn't get home until like about 10:30 or so. But then she took the dogs and like was playing with them and trying to keep them entertained because like I got stuff to do. So I'm chipping up tile or whatever. And at about 11:30, I'm like, I think this is as good as it's going to get in my unskilled hands, you know. And I had talked to, during that time, I had been on the phone with middle management and then been like, hey, this is what happened. I don't think they're coming back. You need to get someone out here. And they left with all the stuff. So they left boxes of tile because neither of them are sufficiently strong to like load up like 4 boxes of a tile in the amount of time when I would have been like, nah, leave that shit here, you know. So like they had like a couple of, you know, there were 3 or 4 bags of like mortar and stuff, and they like kind of grabbed that and like took off. And I'm like, they left with the materials except for some of like 3 boxes of tile. Like I'm gonna need that stuff for tomorrow. And he's like, I'll get you somebody tomorrow to help install it, and then whatever. I'm like, okay. So I'm chipping up stuff, get everything done. My wife and I were like, we can't live here. Because like we got holes and stuff. We can't put the bed back in here. Like, what do we do? So we're like, well, we'll go back to the hotel that we checked out of this morning and see if we can get. We go back, they're full. There's no one. There's no rooms, and like there's not another spot that has that accepts dogs. So we had nowhere to go with the dogs. So we went back to the house and we're like, we don't have.
Mind you, it's probably bordering on midnight now.
This is about 12:30, 1 o'clock at this point. We're like, let's just shower. We'll throw like the room where we kept the dogs while I was working that didn't need any work. We'll move our bed into there, and we'll sleep there, and we'll get access to some of the sheets. Mind you, we haven't had a washer or dryer or anything, so like these are sheets that are a month old sitting in the back of the house. And we're like, I'm like, whatever, just we'll shower and we'll get ready for that or whatever. We go to and this is probably the coup de grace on the top of that day. Is like I go to the shower, the one shower we have that works in the house, the one. And we get a shower curtain because there was no shower curtain in there. We get a shower curtain out of the garage, we put the shower rod and curtain up, and we're like, okay, well we'll go to, and then we're like, oh fuck. There's a hole in our shower because one of the things that they were supposed to do is they were supposed to fix and install the closet doors again. And though they were working on it, they didn't finish it because these are people that don't finish jobs at all. Like they get 90% of the way and they're like, it's good enough. So what they had done is they had taken one of the closet doors and put it in the shower, but they put it in there like angry, probably after our argument, and the shower rod, or not the shower rod, the door rod that goes into the wall and like into the frame or whatever, into the sliding part, busted through and put a giant hole in the wall of our shower that leads like into the drywall and stuff. And so like now we're at like, well fuck, we don't have any working showers now because this is just gonna lead to like wood, you know, water getting back there. So I go hunting for some duct tape, and later we get Flex Seal, like all the commercials, like just slap Flex Seal on it. And surprisingly enough, that shit holds. It's watertight and it don't fucking move. Like
Flex Seal, you can
sponsor
make
us.
checks payable to End of a Species or Adam and Jeff, or just call us and we'll tell you you can PayPal it.
Yeah,
we got you.
But we put duct tape on it for that night, showered, put Flex Seal on it the next day. And we were just like, we defeatedly showered and went to bed. The next day, wife had to go back to work, and I was standing there with the dogs. I waited for this mysterious person to show up, and his crew. One guy shows up. Now, this guy, in talking to him, is from Italy, barely speaks English. But I'm explaining to him what he needs, and he's like, oh, too much. And I'm like, too much? What do you mean too much? Like, is this too much for you to do? He doesn't have a crew. It's just him. He's like, too much. Just too much. And I'm like, expensive. This is expensive. Too much. I'm like, what the fuck does he mean? It's like, this is going to cost me more money? So I call middle management, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, this guy says it's too much. I don't know if he means it's too much, like it's going to cost me money, or it's too much for him to do this weekend, or what. But like, he's saying too much. And he's like, okay, well, let me give him a call. I'm at Disney right now with my family, and I'm like, oh, how? I'm like, oh, on a Saturday, how appropriate. Thank you so much.
I mean, I don't want to begrudge anybody their vacation and whatever, but that's just delicious. Yeah. That's just magnifique.
So, in talking to Mr. Italiano a little bit more, what I gathered was that he understood that this was a job that's gone south, saw the damage and what needed to be replaced, and he's like, oh, what he meant by too much was like, these are too many hollow tiles to have installed on a new job. This is a bad install. And I'm like, thank you. He's like, that's what I ended up getting from him, is that this shouldn't have happened. And you're like, you know what? You're right. This should not have happened. And so he takes the next 2.5 hours and fixes everything. I chipped up all the stuff over the course of yesterday. He installed all of it, new, solid, in a day. And he's like, don't walk on it, don't do this, don't do that. I'll be back later to, finish grout and whatever. And I was like, okay. He cleaned up after himself. He washed everything down that he had dirtied. He had a little vacuum. He vacuumed and stuff. And I'm like, where the fuck was this guy?
That's what I was thinking.
Where, cleaned everything, handled stuff. I'm like, what? Where? This is your guy. Give him a crew. Get him 2 or 3 people to handle jobs. Because in talking to him, guess what? When he was in Italy, he did tile for 10 years. He's been in America for 4 years doing tile.
And Italy tile is no joke.
Yeah, Italy tile. That's where religion is made.
Yeah. That's
they will if you fuck up tile there, you fuck up the Lord's work and you will get smoted.
But it's not even it's you get planks. It's the little
tiny shit. Yeah,
you gotta put it, and everyone gotta be the exact right.
Yeah, because you're making a mosaic out of this shit, man.
And it has to blend with the tile that fucking Michelangelo worked on. That's the shit that you're up against.
Fucking
does
that
this
guy
look like this? It does not, does it? Oh, there's standards there.
Yeah. So in any case, he thanked me. He apologized or whatever for everything, and I'm like, no, you handled it awesome. Thank you. And so he went along his way, and that was it. And then we were at the point of okay, we can start to kind of move stuff in, but we still have 2 broken showers. We have 2 working toilets. We've got, a bunch of drywall that's not done. We have a bunch of baseboard that's not installed. We don't have any vanities at the moment. We got nothing. What do we do? So we began the painstaking process of installing everything that we've installed already again, and we were told would be taken care of for us, and hasn't been. And we have been, and since that day, because that's kind of the final day where we've had anyone really in our house. No, well, I take that back. The next week, we had found a plumber to install the broken shower and get that up and running. We paid for it. I mean, we were told it would be covered for us, but we paid for someone to come out and do it. They installed the tub. They installed the shower surround. They don't do drywall, so they weren't going to do that. So I ended up having to do the drywall for it. And my wife painted it, and we caulked it and whatever. But they installed the tub, and then They were like, "Hey, your shower surround's broken. The new one that they delivered." And I'm like, "Okay." And they said that the soonest they could get a new one delivered was going to be Thursday. And I'm like, "Okay." So they deliver a new one on Thursday. That one's broken. I'm at work, and my wife is like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I don't know what to do either. So I come home and I'm like, where did they get one? So like what happened while I was at work was she was at home. The guys finished installing drainage and checked drains and whatever else. They went to install the shower surround. They're like, hey, one of the 3 things in the shower surround is broken. It needs to get replaced. They that was the one that got delivered on Thursday. My wife told the delivery drivers, hey, we need another one. So they go to the next town over because they're like, well, this was our last one. And I'm like, well, I know why no one bought it. It's because it's broken. They get one from there, bring it back, and they're like, we didn't want to like not bring it to you, but like this one's pretty fucked up. And they take it off the truck, and it's basically mangled. And I'm like, I'm like, why did they even bother to bring it? Why did they even bother to bring it over? Like that's obviously busted up. Like. And so, like, I come home from work.
It's 2021. Like, send a picture.
So I come home from work, and we go out and buy a new one. We go up to. They went south to get to that store, and they're like, "Well, we can't get it to you until tomorrow." And tomorrow at 10:00, and the plumber is we'll be there at 8. And we're like, well, we need you at 10. Like, we couldn't tell a light. And they're like, you know what? We'll get it tonight. So we go north to the next town up there and go to that one. And we go and we open it up in the aisle, check it, make sure it's good. And then we're like, this is the one. We buy it, another one. So this is now the 3rd one that we've purchased, because I originally, like, this is going back, but like when I originally purchased it the first time, when I went to install it, like it was broken. We found it was broken. And we're like, okay, so I took it out and then went back, and then they're like, oh, well, you've already cut holes and stuff in it, so I had to buy another one. Like that was a whole thing, and I'm like, I just ordered $10,000 worth of this from you, like.
That should have been a sign.
Yeah, like you can't hand me like a $200 shower surround. I'm like, all right, whatever. So this is now the 3rd one that I bought, and then like that one's good. I have it there ready for the plumbers tomorrow. After the plumbers install it and there's no other issues, I pack up the old one and then return the broken one that they delivered and get my money back for that. And I'm like, here, take this.
Small victory.
They install all the piping or whatever, but they're like, hey, yeah, we don't do drywall, so you got to find someone to do drywall, which is me. So I have learned tiling, plumbing, drywalling, cabinetry, all kinds of shit during this last 3 months. I am this, like, if I learn a little bit more about electric, because I've installed all new outlets and switches and stuff. If I learn how to wire a house, I could build a house at this point. Like I feel confident enough that like I could lay a foundation, put up some walls and some frames, and build my next house.
So this saga is going to continue, but we're going to leave off this episode with this. I have recently, this is had my first time at your house in a while, and
well, yeah, because we had a D&D game last week.
Yeah.
And you came over and I was like, how'd the bathroom look? And you're like, it looks good. And I'm like, yeah, mostly me. Like,
yeah.
Basically, almost the entire thing was me.
For the listener, I want you guys to picture if you went into like a nightclub, but the nightclub was populated with, let's say, cannibals. Like when you first walk in the nightclub, it's dark and you're looking around and you're like, oh, everything looks good. But then Judge Dredd will tap you on the shoulder and let you know, like, this is a nightclub full of cannibals. And then you look closer and you're like, oh my God. That's the experience I had, because I walked in, I'm like, oh, look, it looks like they fixed it. The tile looks good.
And then we start showing
and
you
then
stuff.
You guys started like, but look over there. And I look and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then I look over there, I'm like, holy. So it's stuff that's like, unless you're like, it's bad. Like the space in the doors
our tile is like the rolling waves of the sea. It goes up and down, like walking from one side of the room to the other. It's a journey. It's an experience. It's like IMAX because you slowly go up and down like rolling waves. The reason that, like we mentioned this before, of like they didn't want to do doors is because they don't know how to cut doors, and they cut them short. The pattern is off in 3 different places, like bad, like really bad. And then like there's these huge gaps where you could drop quarters and lose things in like around all the door frames because they didn't cut them right, and they just made them these big ovals, and we're like, what how is this a quality and professional installation of any sort? And we're currently in like, hey, we've also paid for all this other stuff that you said you were going to pay us back. Where's that money? And we're still waiting on it. Like, and we're in this effectively ended in January. Like, I'm still doing repairs and stuff on stuff. Like, I'm still patching things. I've finally finished like baseboards and whatever else. But the tile is
it's March 13th when we're recording this. It may not be March 13th when it's published or you're listening to it, but it's March 13th. And I'm willing to bet that when you are listening to this, this isn't finished. So it is going to continue, and we'll give you guys updates. But holy fuck.
Yeah. And we're like in January. The day the plumber finally finished, and that was the last time we really had anyone in our house, was January 29th. And that was someone we found. Mm-hmm. The last day that Loaves really had anything to do was our cabinets that were broken. Someone came out and fixed them on like February 8th, but that was like an hour because everything had to be special ordered and whatever else. And I don't know that specific date, but like it was a couple weeks later. Like, to get everything done. Like, and that was, a guy who came in and like he wanted to make small talk and be friends, and like we haven't heard, like we're sending emails and they're like, we're getting around to it. And like we're calling people and they're like, we're getting around to it. Like our insurance company has it. And like, why do we have to like, you can't, like, we hired you.
Why are we pulling teeth here?
To do a thing, and you came in and victimized us. And we're just like, hey, like, make right what you did wrong. And they're not. Like on all sides, because the big box chain wants to blame the contractor wants to blame the installer is like, I did the best that I could, and he's blaming whatever else. Like, and like, I haven't heard from anyone in any shape or form of any kind of quality anything. Like, we had a independent adjuster come out and tell us like, hey, they did their quote and they're like, we're going to send that to all people involved, whatever. And that was the last anything. So in any case, closing up the episode, I am Adam. You can find me at Tatooine Hermit.
If you've made it this far
on Instagram,
then you deserve to find Adam on Tatooine Hermit on Instagram. And I'm Jeff, and you can find me at Zeus and Jeff at a bunch of places. But the most common one is Instagram and or Twitter. And this has been the End of a Species podcast.
Yeah. And please like I try and do a funny voice, but I ain't got it in me right now.
Yeah, this was a roller coaster
of like, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever,
yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And the next time you hear us, we may be giving you part 4 of this epic saga.
the epic saga.
Or we'll find some other new sign that the species is over.
Mm-hmm. All right.
See you next time.
Next time.